joining me today to discuss the game is Barnaby Slater from the Spurs On podcast. And the game started, Spurs were on the back foot for the first 15 minutes, and luckily for us, we didn't concede in that moment. We looked like in that first half we were getting back in the game. We had a few chances of our own. We didn't take advantage of it. And then pretty much ever since that goal went in, from 5 minutes to go into the first half, Muniz gets on the score sheet with a really nice finish. And we kind of just completely lost control in that game. And the way we were outplayed in that second half has got to be a bit worrying. But how do you analyse that kind of performance?
Do you know what? I was just thinking while you were talking there that it's pretty common in the Premier League that whoever starts the game with the most intensity and the most desire goes on to win that game. And that's exactly what happened today. Yeah, for sure. After 15 minutes, we kind of rode out the storm. And then we had a good spell from about 15 minutes to about half an hour, 35 minutes. And Sonny had a great chance. Johnson had a good chance. We were really hitting them hard on the transition from winning the ball up high. But I said it earlier in the game, if you don't score when you're at your best, it will come back to bite you. And this time I just think Fulham started the game with more desire. I think a lot of fans would agree that it seemed like their players wanted it a bit more, and there was just felt to me like about 5% difference in terms of the intensity in the legs and the willingness that they were able to press with. And sure, that can change when a team scores a goal. Of course it can, and they get their heads up. And if you don't then score an equaliser and you go 2 and 3-0 down, it becomes incredibly difficult. And that's what happened to Spurs. But it's a lesson today. It's a lesson we're going to have to learn from. It feels like a bit of a commonality with Spurs. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Great result at Villa. Everyone talking about it being the most important game of the season. John McGinn talking about it being the most important game in Aston Villa's modern league history. We go there, win 4-0. Everyone expects we're going to go to Craven Cottage and turn them over easily. Sky put it on TV. They want Fulham, the underdogs, to win. Night game. The fans are up for it. And Fulham got that first goal, and then we did. We kind of collapsed like a deck of cards. I can't think of really, other than Vicario, I can't think of any performance better than a 5 out of 10 really today. Yeah. The fullbacks were completely anonymous. Fulham just knew that there was space in the inside right and the inside left channel over and over and over again. Both of the first 2 goals came from that. We never recovered. We didn't change much. We had a few chances in that second half. Timo Werner should have scored. It strikes me again with Timo, unfortunately, if there's any situation where he has to think about it at all, and I even mean in this, like the second that he had to think about it while the ball comes across, he's thinking, don't mess this up, don't mess this up. And because he's thinking like that, he messes it up. Whereas the goal last week that he scored just felt to me a bit like instinct straight away. But anyway, it's not Timo Werner's fault. It's the collective team's fault. They weren't at the races today. It happens. It's a shame we've got 2 weeks to think about it, but we move on.
Yeah, and it's just one of those games where where everyone is having an off day, and it's so rare that we've had that this season. I feel that this is probably one of the first times this season where I look at us and we were very, very easy to play against, especially in that second half. I thought first half was a bit more of an even game, and I did feel like it was quite even. And I know we went in 1-0 down, but we had chances, they had chances. I thought we were doing really well in terms of winning the ball back in their defensive third. They were doing really well winning the ball back in the middle of the park, and it was kind of who was going to get the opening goal. And obviously Fulham did get it, but the way we came out in that second half, it's hard to put your finger on why we came out in that kind of manner, because we should have expected a fast start like we did in the first half with Fulham coming flying out the traps and creating all those chances. And it's one of the first times this season, it hasn't happened too often, but it's one of the first times where we've been so clearly out-tacticked, I feel, and it was just like an easy game for the opposition. I just felt like we barely laid a glove on them in that second half, and they were just finding very easy overloads on the wide areas. Robinson and Castagna, or whoever was playing in the fullbacks at any given time, were just finding acres of space, and it was so easy for them to get in behind us. And they were just feeding them every time, chance after chance. Set pieces, we looked weak. We looked like we could concede from many set pieces. In fact, we could have conceded another one. We could have conceded a fourth one.
There was a goal disallowed.
That was disallowed for offside. And we were just really, it was way too easy to play against. Then going forward, look, to be fair, after we went 3-0 down, we did have like a flurry of chances, didn't we, where we could have got back in the game. If one of them goes in, you never know what could have happened at that point with maybe like 25 minutes to go. But we did miss those chances. And for the last 15 minutes or so, we looked toothless. We didn't look like ever hurting this Fulham side. And that's like very, very disappointing. I wouldn't say concerning, but very disappointing. I do think in the long run, these will be experiences we learn from and we can build off, and Andrew point to say this is, why this happened. He'll analyse it and go into it. But one of the most curious things today is just how Basuma and Sarr and Maddison, I just think our midfield was completely overrun. They couldn't deal with Fulham's midfield. And I have to say, João Palhinha, probably for me, man of the match. I thought he was exceptional. We couldn't handle him. And it's rare that you just can't handle a midfielder from a defensive point of view. Yeah. And he's just everywhere, covering every blade of grass. Every time we went forward, he seemed to be just there every time, stopping us. And he was a real example of the aggression and that intensity that you need in central midfield in this league.
Yeah, so interesting that just at the end there you said aggression, because what I was thinking is the one thing that is lacking from Tottenham's three in midfield there is physicality. And if you look at Palhinha, he brings a physicality that we don't have. If you look at Rodri at Man City, he brings a physicality we don't have. Now, I like Basuma. He didn't have a great game today. I like him. I love how he takes the ball on the half turn. But when you're facing somebody in the opposition midfield who does put their foot in every time and does tell you that he's there every time, and as well is brilliant positionally, then yeah, it did seem like we were a little bit overrun. I mean, talking about, you mentioned there, why we were unable to start well in the second half or whatever. The reality is, and I mentioned it in the watch along, the game is about moments, and they were more clinical. And the two worst times to score, arguably, just before half time, just after half time, killed us, absolutely killed us. And I think the players didn't, for the first time maybe this season, because even in that Brighton game where we were 4-0 down, we still managed to score a couple of goals and really put the pressure on them. But for the first time, we just looked devoid of ideas, an inability to change anything up. Yeah, I agree with you. If Werner, you mentioned earlier, if Werner had maybe scored that goal, then maybe then momentum changes a bit. Maybe they get a little bit frightened, and Fulham get a little bit worried and sit back a bit more. But they were just popping it around second half. They really made us look very average and playing around like Brazil at times. The fans were olaying it and we couldn't get near them. And yeah, I agree with you. It's not concerning long term for me, but I think Ange, he'll make the players watch that in a debrief, and I think he'll be just like, you've got to ask yourself, are you willing? You've got to be willing to put in the same effort at 3-0 as you did at 0-0, and if you don't, I'll find players who will.
Obviously, a large part of the narrative today will be Dragusin's first start, no Van de Ven, and obviously we end up losing 3-0. For me personally, I actually thought, like, in terms of our team in general, he was probably one of our better players in general. Obviously, I don't think he had a great game, especially in that second half. I did think he was having a really good first half performance, and albeit there were some loose passes from him that went straight out of play. But what did you take out of his first start for Spurs?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think what it really does do, not that this needed to happen, but the stock rises of Mickey Van de Ven once again, because the record of Spurs while he's been on the pitch, I think, is pretty unbelievable. And I think there are things that Mickey Van de Ven does away from the obvious things that maybe we missed today. But the obvious things are, of course, anything that goes over him behind, even if it bounces, he generally gets back and wins. Whereas there's probably things where he's more on the front foot, blocking some of the passes coming into the strikers and coming into the forward line that maybe we missed a bit today. But no, I think, like, specifically, do I think Dragusin had a bad game? No, I don't. I don't actually blame him for any of those goals. But, to all of those people who have been in the comments week after week and on Twitter week after week, Dragusin should play just because he's a new signing. He needs time to acclimatise. It's an outlier rather than a rule or a commonality that Mickey Van de Ven has been so good straight away coming into the Premier League. Not many foreign players settle in the way he has, and we're going to have to give Dragusin time, and we should take it as feeling lucky that we have two centre-halves that are so good as Romero and Van de Ven that when they're fit, we're able to play them, because, yes, I think we are a better team with them as the two centre-halves, because they are able to cover far more successfully the marauding fullbacks, because today there was so much space in that inside right and inside left channel that it was kind of embarrassing at times.
It was.
Like that second goal, the cross that comes in, yes, it flies in off his thigh, but the time, they had that time to play that across the front of the box over and over and over again.
Yeah, and like the third goal, like Bassi has time to take a touch, turn in the penalty area, get a shot off, and then, you know, Dragusin unfortunately didn't react quick enough to Muniz, and obviously he was able to tap it
Sorry
home.
to interrupt. Can I say about that, actually? I think this is one area where I would question Ange a little bit. He's made a bit of a rod for his own back by saying, oh, I have no interest in employing specific set-piece coaches. Because it's one thing saying that if you're good at it, if you're good at defending set pieces and you're scoring lots of goals from corners and free kicks, sure, then I can understand it. But unfortunately, it's a rod for your own back if stuff like that happens, where we lose the first header again, which we do all the time, although I would say Dragusin in the first half improved us a lot in terms of clearing the first header from corners. But we lost it this time, and then unfortunately from that first header, where they are told to push out, Romero just dropped a bit deep, and that kept Bassi on, and then to allow Bassi, who's basically a tugboat, to turn and get a shot off that hits the post. And then, Dragusin is behind him and ends up nearly giving away a penalty, but it goes in anyway. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt there, but I just wanted to say I think Ange has to be careful, because for me, he's a progressive football coach, but it's a little bit backward to say, oh, I'm not interested in specific set-piece coaches, particularly when you look at the fact that Liverpool have succeeded but they've had a throw-in coach, not only a set-piece coach, but a throw-in coach, a set-piece coach. And obviously we had a lot of success last season with Vio in our attacking set-pieces, and he let him go, and we've not looked great this season on that front.
Look, bigger picture stuff now. So after that big win against Villa last week, everyone was getting excited about really pushing for that top four. Obviously, we'll await Aston Villa's result tomorrow, where they go away at West Ham. But that kind of result and performance, does that change any of your thinking when it comes to Spurs getting into that top four?
No. But also the way it doesn't change my thinking is that we are in a far better position than I expected us to be. We are having far fewer of these kind of results than I expected us to have at this stage. Ange is still getting to know them, and these results are going to happen. It tends to happen in the games where we're like, oh, we've just done really well, we've got a chance to go on a good run, got a chance to really show what we can do, and then suddenly it comes back to bite us. I still think we'll finish above Aston Villa. I don't think Manchester United are good enough to put together the kind of run they would need to finish above Spurs and Aston Villa. And after this week's European results, it looks like fifth is pretty much nailed on for being Champions League anyway. So I think we'll still get in the Champions League. And that, for me, is far further ahead in the project than I expected. That will put pressure on us, though, if it happens, to really put more depth in this squad and to allow Ange to get the players in with the attributes that he wants. He came out only a week or two ago saying, he doesn't want to spend 100 million on one player. Well, that'll suit Daniel Levy, because he won't want him to either. He says he's more comfortable spending £50 million on two players. Well, I think if we're in the Champions League next season, actually having a bigger depth at 50 million kind of level players will suit us better. But I also do think we need to buy a kind of special player who can do something a little bit out of the ordinary when we need that.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and I think in terms of the top four race, I'm still confident, even after a result like that we can finish above Villa. The performance does kind of worry me, I have to say, a bit, just because of how it was the first time, I believe, this season where for the whole game we've looked fairly easy to play against, and that is a bit of a concern, because in every game, even in games we've lost, we've looked difficult to play against. But today we looked very average, and that was pretty concerning. But I just hope that the 2-week break, we can just mull over what happened and come into the, after international break with fresh energy. We've got Luton at home. Then I think we go away at West Ham, and then maybe at home to Forest, I think. So got some games there to really lay the gauntlet down and try and put some more pressure on Villa. And it's a bad day at the office. No one can deny that. We were shocking today, and it was really surprising how bad we were, considering what a great result and a confidence boost last week should have been. So to put that kind of performance in this week was really not just terribly frustrating, but it was just really surprising. Didn't expect that after last week. So that is got to be something that Ange's got to think about. But I still think we're on the right path, and I think even today, if things could have gone a different way, if certain things would have changed, Madison, or if we would have gone 1-0 up in that first half instead of 1-0 down, if Werner maybe scored at that chance, maybe things would have turned out differently. It was just one of those where everything went against us. Everything went against us.
It did, and I'll just say one more thing, which is I just think we're not ready to go to Villa and Fulham 2 games in a row and turn them both over easily. We're not ready. We're not at that stage, and we proved it today. And it might end up being, I'm pretty glass half full. It might end up being one of the best things that happens to us, because they clearly came into the game today thinking, oh, we just turned over Villa 4-0 away. We're going to turn these over easy, and they got their asses spanked, frankly.